3 Iranian fighter jets attacked a U.S. carrier group. Then this happened. The water moves in long, low swells. Under a pre-dawn sky without stars, the surface is the color of dark iron. No wind to speak of. The horizon sits perfectly flat. At the center of the formation, USS Ronald Reagan, a Nimitz-class nuclear carrier, maintains steady base course 270 at 18 knots. Her flight deck is active but not hurried. Two F-488M Super Hornets from VFA 102 complete their pre-launch checks on the bow catapults. A third aircraft, an E-2D Advanced Hawkeye, has been airborne for 40 minutes, running its assigned racetrack orbit at 22,000 feet to the northwest. Its rotodome scanning a 200-mile radius with quiet precision. The escort screen is positioned as doctrine requires. To the north, USS Shiloh, a Ticonderoga-class cruiser, holds her station at 15 nautical miles. To the south, USS Fitzgerald and USS Milius, both Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, are positioned at 12 and 14 miles respectively, extending the formation's sensor coverage across the threat axis. To the east, completing the outer defensive arc, USS Changchun holds the far flank. The Combat Information Center aboard Reagan is cool and dim. Watchstanders monitor their consoles in the measured rhythm of routine patrol. Track managers log commercial air traffic. The tactical action officer runs his eyes across the composite tactical picture. A dense mosaic of contacts, each labeled, each behaving as expected. At 4451, nothing on the picture suggests the next 90 minutes will require anything beyond standard watch procedures. At Vi-5-7, the E-2D Hawkeye calls in Night Watch 1. Reports a faint return at bearing 048, range 167 miles. The contact is low. Its altitude places it below 5,000 feet, skirting the upper edge of the surface clutter band. The return is intermittent, not unusual in itself. Ground clutter off the Iranian coast, refraction effects. These are common in this operational area. The Hawkeye's ACIS computer tags it as Track 4417. Tentative. One return. The TIO aboard Reagan notes it and continues his sweep. At 05:14:14, Track 4417 reappears. This time the return is marginally stronger and the position is shifted 16 miles closer. The rate of closure suggests an airspeed of roughly 500 knots. Still low. The Hawkeye crew correlates the contact against a known commercial routing corridor. It does not match. The controller in the E-2D transmits a standard query to Reagan CIC, Night Watch 1, new track, bearing 048, range 151, altitude estimated 3,000. Closure rate consistent with high-performance aircraft. Requesting correlation check. Reagan CIC runs the contact through its database. No filed flight plan. No Mode C transponder squawk. The track is radiating nothing. At 05:19, two additional contacts appear on the Hawkeye's scope. They materialize within 8 miles of Track 4417, emerging from the same low-altitude clutter band. Their spacing is deliberate, roughly 4 miles lateral separation. The geometry of the formation is not random. Night Watch 1 transmits again, calm and precise. 3 contacts now, bearing 047 to 051, range 143 to 148. Formation profile. Designating Track 4418 and Track 4418 and Track 4418. The TAO aboard Reagan picks up his handset. At E-522, the carrier goes to Condition 3, watch standing. The second section of combat air patrol fighters, 2 more Super Hornets from VFA 41, is directed to man aircraft on the deck. The alert posture advances 1 level without announcement on the flight deck. The plane handlers and flight deck crew do their work without urgency, but nothing is slow. Aboard Shiloh, to the north, the SPY-1B radar has already been tracking the formation independently. The cruiser's CIC watches the 3 contacts maintain consistent bearing and altitude, closing at a rate that will put them inside 100 miles in approximately 9 minutes. The Shiloh TIO transmits to the formation net. Shiloh actual. We hold 3 contacts bearing 048, corroborated with Night Watch. Formation spacing consistent with tactical spread. Evaluating. The word evaluating carries operational weight in this context. It is the professional equivalent of a raised hand. At 0526, the electronic support measure suite aboard Fitzgerald, positioned on the southern flank, registers a low-powered emission on a frequency band associated with airborne fire control radar, specifically a mode consistent with post-Doppler search. The signal is brief. It lasts less than 4 seconds before cutting off. The ESM operator logs it immediately. He transmits Fitzgerald ESM. Single emission, bearing 045, duration 4 seconds. Frequency band consistent with airborne intercept radar in search mode. Signal lost. The formation net goes quiet for 2 seconds. Then the TIO aboard Reagan acknowledges. At 0529, the 3 contacts cross 120 miles. Their altitude has dropped. Night Watch 1 estimates they are now below 2,000 feet. Flying low over water at night at this range from a carrier group is not a navigational error. It is a technique. It compresses the radar horizon, delays detection, and narrows the defensive response window. The formation's layered defense posture depends on geometry and timing. At 120 miles, the outer engagement envelope for Shiloh's standard missiles is technically reachable under specific conditions, but engagement criteria require more than a return on a scope. Rules of engagement, positive identification, command authority, these run in parallel with the geometry, and they take time. At 0533, the E-2D crew achieves a continuous track on all 3 contacts. The intermittent returns have consolidated into solid tracks. The formation is maintaining its spread. The closure rate has not changed. Bearing drift is minimal, which means these contacts are not drifting across the formation's front. They are coming directly at it. Night Watch 1 transmits, all 3 tracks showing near zero bearing drift. Attack geometry forming on current course. Estimated intercept window opening in 14 minutes at current closure rate. On the carrier bridge, the officer of the deck initiates a course adjustment, a gentle turn to keep the threat contacts at a less favorable bearing for any weapons release, and to keep the bow catapults oriented for a rapid launch. The turn is 15 degrees. It takes less than 90 seconds and places the formation in a slightly better defensive geometry. The alert cap fighters on the deck are now armed and fueled. The aircrew is in the cockpits. At 5:37, Shiloh reports she has developed a preliminary fire control solution on the lead contact, track 4417. The solution is not mature. The track's emissions remain sparse and the altitude estimate carries uncertainty, but the tracking geometry is solid. The cruiser's weapons officer notes the solution in the log. Aboard Fitzgerald and Milius, both ships have begun adjusting their positions within the escort screen to optimize their own sensor arcs and minimize the shadow zones behind the carrier's island structure. This repositioning is not dramatic. It is a shift of 2 miles over 6 minutes, executed on low-speed adjustments. The result is a tighter, more coherent defensive net. At 0541, Fitzgerald's ESM sweep lights up again. This time the emission is different. The ESM operator's voice is level. Fitzgerald ESM. New emission bearing 046. Duration ongoing. Frequency shifted. Mode consistent with fire control solution development. Signal is continuous. Evaluating track correlation. A fire control radar and continuous emission is categorically different from a search pulse. A search pulse gathers information. A continuous fire control emission means a weapon solution is being developed. Something on the other end is doing the geometry needed to put a weapon on a target. The ESM operator continues, signal strength increasing, consistent with decreased range, correlating to track 4417. The TAO aboard Reagan transmits to the formation. All stations, Romeo. Weapons-free criteria under review. Hold current posture. At 0543, Shiloh requests permission to elevate her engagement posture. The request moves up the command chain through the Air Defense Commander. The answer comes in under 40 seconds. Authority granted to prepare for defensive engagement. Shiloh does not fire. She prepares. The difference is a readiness condition, a finger near a switch, not a decision. The alert cap fighters on Reagan's deck are given clearance for immediate launch. At 054430, the first catapult fires. The two Super Hornets from VFA-41, Calzine's Grizzly 1 and Grizzly 2, are airborne within 90 seconds of each other. They turn immediately to bearing 045 and begin a rapid climb to intercept altitude. The E-2D Hawkeye hands off data link tracks to both aircraft simultaneously. Within 4 minutes of launch, both fighters have the 3 inbound contacts locked on their own radars. At 0548, Grizzly 1 transmits, Night Watch, Grizzly 1. Contacts in radar acquisition. 3 tracks confirmed. Range 72 miles. Altitude below 1,500 feet. Speed 580 knots. Request IFF status. Night Watch 1 responds. Grizzly 1, IFF is negative. No squawk on any contact. No RLA on file. No radar transponder. No flight plan. No radio contact, despite multiple guard calls that have been transmitted since 0530 on international emergency frequencies. The contacts have not responded. At 0551, the lead contact, track 417, begins a climb. It ascends rapidly from below 1,500 feet to 12,000 feet in under 90 seconds. The climb is not gradual. It is a pop-up maneuver. The geometry of a pop-up climb at this range, with continuous fire control emissions still active, is consistent with one specific operational purpose: achieving an altitude that provides a weapons release envelope against a surface target. Fitzgerald's ESM operator transmits immediately. ESM update. Fire control emission now elevated bearing, consistent with pop-up geometry. Signal mode shift, consistent with pre-launch parameter lock. The tail aboard Reagan speaks 2 words into the formation net: weapons free. At 0555-242-14, Shiloh fires. 2 standard missiles, SM-2 Block 30B, leave their forward Mk-41 launch cells in a 6-second interval. They accelerate to supersonic speed within seconds, guided by the cruiser's illumination radar. The engagement geometry has been held continuously for 11 minutes. The firing solution is mature. The missiles follow a semi-active radar homing profile, climbing steeply before arcing down toward Track 4417's position. Track 4417 responds. At 7552-31, the lead contact executes a hard defensive break, a rapid course reversal, combined with a descent back toward the surface clutter band. It begins dispensing chaff. The ESM signature changes sharply. The fire control emission drops off mid-sequence. Grizzly 1 is now at 41 miles from the nearest contact. He transmits, Grizzly 1, target maneuvering, break right observed, Fox 3. An AIM-120 AMRAM leaves Grizzly 1's right wing station and guides on track 4419, the contact that has not yet broken. Track 4419 is still on its original approach, bearing at 90 knots closure. Grizzly 2 engages track 4418. At 055337, track 4418 disappears from the E-2D scope. The return collapses from a solid track to scattered returns, then to nothing. Night Watch 1 logs the loss of track. Track 4418 breaks left and descends aggressively. Grizzly 2 calls. Grizzly 2, target evading, continuing intercept. At 05554, the tactical picture aboard Reagan begins to shift. Track 4417, the lead aircraft, is now heading northeast at low altitude. Its fire control radar silent, its chaff cloud still visible as a dispersed clutter return on the Hawkeye's scope. It is not a longer closing, it is opening. Range is increasing. Track 4418 is in a hard descending turn to the north. Grizzly 2 is in pursuit, currently 31 miles behind it. The contact's behavior has transitioned from offensive to evasive. The attack geometry that was forming 17 minutes ago is now broken. Of the 3 original contacts, 1 track is gone, 1 is running north, and 1, track 4417, is retreating toward the Iranian coast. At 0555530, the ESM suite aboard Fitzgerald reports that all fire control emissions have ceased. The frequency band is silent. Shiloh transmits a weapon status update to the formation. Both SM-2 rounds have completed their flight. Track 4417's evasive maneuver and chaff deployment degraded the engagement. The missiles did not achieve intercept on the retreating target. This is logged without commentary. At 05556, Grizzly 2 reports track 4418 has crossed back into territorial airspace and broken off pursuit. He turns back toward the carrier. Night Watch 1 transmits a composite tactical picture update. Air picture update. Tracked 4417 and tracked 4418 have reversed course and are opening. Tracked 4419 is lost. No additional contacts in threat corridor. Formation. Defensive posture holding. The TAO acknowledges. The formation net settles. At 663, Reagan stands down from condition 3. The alert posture reduces by 1 level. The 2 CAP fighters remain airborne, now repositioned on a combat air patrol orbit at the western edge of the formation's outer defensive arc. The flight deck resumes its standard cycle. The cruiser Shiloh logs her engagement record and begins a tracking reconstruction with her combat systems team. The destroyers hold their positions within the reformed escort screen. Chung-hoon on the eastern flank reports no contacts of interest throughout the engagement. The encounter lasted approximately 62 minutes from first detection to the restoration of normal watch conditions. Tactical reconstruction, post-engagement analysis. The outcome of this encounter was not decided by a single weapon or a single decision. It was the product of overlapping systems functioning within their designed parameters across multiple platforms. The E-2D Hawkeye was the critical enabling node. Its ability to maintain continuous tracking on low-altitude contacts at range, integrating intermittent returns into coherent tracks, gave the formation a detection and response window that the approaching aircraft's low-altitude profile was specifically designed to deny. The Hawkeye's early correlation, at track age -31 minutes before the engagement threshold, gave the defensive posture time to develop without urgency. The ESM suite aboard Fitzgerald provided the second critical input. The detection of fire control emissions at 0537 and the subsequent identification of a mode shift to pre-launch parameters at 0535-1 gave the TAO a sensor-fused picture that exceeded what radar alone could provide. The electronic order of battle, built patiently over the patrol period, allowed a threat-consistent emission to be recognized immediately, rather than evaluated from scratch. Shiloh's ability to hold a continuous fire control solution from 0537 onward, 12 full minutes before the engagement order, meant that when weapons free was authorized, the firing was immediate. There was no targeting delay, no last-minute geometry correction. The solution was already mature. The weapon was already on the rail. The pop-up maneuver executed by Track 4117 at 5551 was tactically sound in isolation. It sought to compress the defensive response window and establish a favorable weapons release envelope before the formation's own engagement could mature. What it encountered instead was a defensive net that had been building its own geometry since 5007. The engagement clock was running in both directions simultaneously, and the formation had more of it. The launch of the alert CAP fighters at Vol 544, 6 minutes before the pop-up, meant that Grizzly 1 and Grizzly 2 were already in radar acquisition when Track 4417 climbed. There was no gap in coverage. The intercept was already tracking. Where the engagement fell short was in achieving a conclusive outcome against Track 4417. The retreating contact's chaff deployment and immediate course reversal, combined with the range at which the SM-2s were fired, produced an engagement geometry that did not result in intercept. This will be examined in the post-mission reconstruction. The engagement timeline and SM-2 firing point will be evaluated against engagement criteria to determine whether an earlier firing decision would have produced a different result. Track 4419. The one contact that did not execute an immediate evasive break is listed as lost track. The specific cause of track loss will be subject to analysis. Grizzly 1's AIM-120 employment and the timeline of track collapse will be correlated during the debrief. What this encounter demonstrates, stripped of outcome, is the function of a layered defense posture under real operational pressure. No single ship held the complete picture. No single sensor covered every gap. The outcome, the preservation of the formation, the breaking of the attack geometry before weapons release occurred, was a collective result. the formation's geometry, its sensor arcs, its timing, its communication discipline. These are not technical specifications on a capability brief. They are the actual content of what happened in the Persian Gulf before dawn on this watch. What aspect of this engagement do you think was most decisive? The early electronic detection, the CAP launch timing, or the cruiser's fire control preparation? Leave your analysis below.